Clive Foley, so glad to see you again. I want to hear about what you've been up to, what you've been working on lately, and what are some of the problems that you've been solving lately for some of the companies you've been helping. So, get me up to speed, man. What have you been up to?
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, good to see you again. I'm working with a client at the moment on what I like to call a turnaround. So it's a client who's in a place where they don't want to be. They're trying to scale. They have product market fit, and they know that the customer base is out there. They know that they have problems that they can solve, value they can bring to customers. One of the challenges they have is though they've tried to scale, they've had difficulty in doing so, and they've had to take a step back. So confidence has been knocked a little bit. So yeah, I'm helping that company to get them to where they want to get to and then realize their ambitions.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot of companies in that boat right now where they're having to do the proverbial turn the ship around. Some of the bets that maybe they made in the last year or two are not growing at the rate they need them to. Given
Yeah.
the conditions, and so they're needing your help right now to do this. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the maybe the warning signs that they were seeing, or some of the symptoms that they were experiencing that made it easy for them to understand they needed to bring you in to help fix this?
Yeah, one of the major challenges was, as I said, they got that product market fit and they were like, let's just keep going exactly the way we were. And revenues are growing in the right way, the profit margins are in the right way. Let's keep going. But the challenge is at scale, the assumption was that scale was just a technological problem. We need more servers, we need more database, we need more infrastructure. What that has found, though, is your classic business challenge around unit economics. So as the revenue went up, the costs that were variable went up with them. And the challenge was while the profit margin maintained, at a certain point, revenue started to smooth out, but the costs kept coming. And when that crossover occurred, they were the signals that they were in trouble. Their product is very usage orientated, so revenue is not linear forever. So it's not like per seat or things of this nature. So the challenge there was that try and take those variable costs and turn them into fixed costs. So this could be a predictable business. And these are the elements of scaling that they have had a challenge with. Scaling the business is not just scaling the technology; it's actually scaling all the dynamics and all the unit economics of the business at the same time.
Oh man, that's a huge insight because I think a lot of first time founders and particularly technical founders think that, yeah, it's just like a throw money at the problem to scale. Like we just need more servers. We just need to scale the technical side. It's a requests per minute issue. And
Mm-hmm.
that's all we need to solve. And then there can be some big surprises on the actual business side at that point.
100%. And one of the challenges on the engineering side was, um, on one hand, it's a really good thing about the cloud, right? You can just crank the dial. So that makes it really easy to do so. The lagging indicator is when the bill shows up 30 days later and you're like, oh, the crank on that dial was very, very expensive. And the challenge then from running a business is, well, you crank the dial and everything keeps working. But it's not till the invoices show up, both the ones you send out and the ones you receive, and you balance everything off and you're like, oh, we are not actually viable this month. How many months has this been occurring for? And the scary thing is, what's going to happen next month?
That is the stuff that makes founders wake up in a cold sweat. The surprise invoices, and it's like such a problem across so many companies. Like there's a whole cottage industry that's popped up of just consultants and tools that optimize that and prevent that fear. And so I would love to hear kind of what is your approach when it comes to doing this kind of a turnaround, because I'm sure many companies are listening right now and thinking like, what can we do? Because we're in the same boat. So how do you approach a problem like this?
The first thing I try and do is I bring the business back to viability in a way that's predictable. So as I mentioned there, those costs, if they are variable, you want to try and get them to be fixed. And that's the whole point of actually technology. Is if from a business perspective, you can design it that your variable costs are essentially non-existent and your costs are fixed, then your whole business becomes embarrassingly predictable. And then as you scale, each new customer is more profitable than the previous. So the first thing I really do is try to understand on the technology side where those variable costs. And I don't want to throw out any kind of statistic, but like the vast majority of the times I find it is the infrastructure, which is typically the cloud today, which is elastic in nature, which is therefore elastic in cost. That's where I start. Um, Storage is generally cheap in the cloud, but what is expensive is compute. So I look for the web resources on the APIs, the web resources on the applications, and where you can really lose cost fast is the compute resources on the database side, particularly if you're using an expensively licensed database like a Microsoft SQL Server, like an Oracle.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you usually come in and work alongside an existing CDO to figure this out, or are you kind of teaching them how to manage these things on their own, or is it some mix of the two, or is it something entirely different?
Um, with the current client, there is no CTO. I've come in as the most senior person, the most senior engineering leader. Um, and in many ways, that's actually a lot easier. There's nobody to convince on the technology side to come on this road, come on this journey. The kind of language I've just used, when you use that then with a CEO who is more business focused, you can get a lot of trust quickly that you value the same things that he or she does. That said, I have worked with in situ CTOs before. What I look for is somebody who has a mentality of, yes, I know we're in a difficult spot. I value what you're going to do. I'm already in the headspace of prepared to listen to your expertise. I think the last thing you want to do is come into some sort of political fight where you have a CTO who's there and he or she is not interested in what you have to say. You've been brought in by the folks who are more on the business side. That's just a recipe for disaster. I stay away from those.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so, I mean, what I'm hearing in what you're saying is really how you're combining and aligning the two worlds of, engineering rigor, let's call it, and best practices, but with the
Hmm.
actual business acumen and the business needs. Tell me more about your approach and how you think about combining those two worlds.
Yeah, I have a philosophy that I like to share with people, and I really do believe this. If you're the kind of company that is mission focused, so you're creating a product for someone to make their life easier, to save them some money, give them some value, that company is making choices based on your product. And if you, as I say, if you truly believe in that mission, I think it's like morally on you to be here tomorrow, because the only way that you can actually fulfill your mission to that customer today is to be here tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and do it over an extended period of time. To do so means you have to run a viable business. You have to be profitable, because if you're not here tomorrow, they're building their world on a castle made of sand. So it's not always the most popular thing to say in technology, but my philosophy, as I say, is you have to be profitable, even if it's a dollar or a euro or a pound sterling or whatever your currency is. You have to make more than you spend. It's a mature thing to do. It's an adult thing to do. And as I said, profit is sometimes a dirty word, but for me, it's a signal of trust. As a customer of you, I can go, you're going to be here tomorrow. I can rely on you. I can purchase your product. I can subscribe to your product. So that mantra, that idea, is definitely what I try to get across to the engineering leadership in particular, that is sometimes missed. But to answer your question more directly, if we go for a viable business, to get yourself to that point, I then look at what I would call protect and grow. So your viable business is obviously your revenue and your income, and then your costs that are involved in doing so. Before you start to scale and grow, that business needs to be viable. So you need to protect that revenue. You need to almost lock it in and guarantee it, because some of the challenges with growing can involve you making substantial changes to your product and most definitely to your processes. So around the protect part, before you actually go through a massive growth, I would work with people on the business side to see how can we lock people into multi-year deals, where the customer may get a discount up front, but you get a lot of cash flow. So then you have capital that you can attribute to the growth stage, or you can give people all sorts of other rewards. But the idea being that to get that cash flow, so you can make the moves that will sustain your growth from a viable position. That combination, viability, protection, and growth, is the kind of model I go after with clients.
That's awesome, man. I love the idea of securing future revenue as a way of funding growth instead of just having to sell equity, through
Yep.
VC or something. Actually, I mean, there's no better group of people to get money from than customers, and I think that's an awesome strategy, especially when fundraising is such a tough climate right now.
Mm.
You're going to not only get the cash you need to grow, but you're also going to be, connecting and speaking with the customers, which is ultimately why anybody's fundraising in the first place anyway.
And it's funny, I've spoken to a few clients over the years, and friends who have like, how do I raise money? How do I do this? And I tell them there's this wonderful group of people, they have money to give you. They're called customers. If you create value for them, and if they get more value than the money that you ask for, everybody wins. And in this scenario I've just described about kind of getting customers into like extended deals, if you give them a discount on it, right, they're able to plan their world from a fixed cost position for a couple of years. You get the cash flow, they're getting a discount. There's a lot of winners all around. And then, as I said, from that, it is a way to get capital, provided it's something that your customers value, so that you can make the moves to grow. So it's funny, we're talking here about like kind of growth, and I know it's a very technical orientated conversation we're having, but we have yet to talk about technology, which I find very interesting. It's a challenge that I see with some colleagues who are CTOs. It's like they forget about, as I said, the viability, the protecting the revenue. We're here to grow a business. We're here to create value for people in a sustainable way. So yeah, the growth is probably the technological stuff that we're about to talk in a moment, but it is very consciously towards the end of the things that I would suggest.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to a turnaround, obviously you don't have a silver bullet that you can wave a wand overnight and it's turned around. But how do you think about timelines and quick wins and longer term strategic things that need to that just need time passing to fully roll out and implement? How does it look like when somebody, let's say, they really need to aggressively cut burn now and fix things? Like, what can they expect when they engage you to start the process of turning around?
Yeah, I think you hear the expression, the data doesn't lie. I go a little further, the numbers don't lie. Like we have to get to an agreed upon starting position where this is reality. There is no guessing, there's no emotional things. Where it's just this is what we bring in, this is what we're spending, and this is what we need to save in order to get to zero. And everybody needs to acknowledge that, and everybody needs to realize what that is. And that has to be the goal. Viability comes first, in my opinion, because if it's not viable, everybody's looking over their shoulder, everybody's burning, everybody's wondering how long do we have, how long do we exist, all this kind of stuff. If you can get back to viability, you get out of this kind of fight or flight mode, you get out of the whole do we exist tomorrow scenario, and you can begin to think about the future. So to me, about an engagement, it's all about figuring out initially where are we and coming up with maybe a back of an envelope on what's your burn rate from where you are to default dead, and you need to get back to default alive. Um, and sometimes the numbers will dictate the timeline. So if somebody's like, in our current burn rate, we're dead in 90 days, well, we got to do something in 89 days. If somebody says we're going to be dead in 6 months, we have a little bit more wriggle room. But those numbers will dictate the urgency and the timeline in question. And based on the timeline, that will dictate how aggressive some of the changes may need to be.
Mm, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, how would you describe like the clients that you like working with best? Like, let's say a company's wanting to fix this problem. They don't want to add to their payroll. They don't want to add to their headcount, to bring in someone full time just to fix this kind of thing. They know that they can't continue on, the current path as it is now, but what are some other traits or attributes of the ideal situation that you can really help turn around quickly?
I look for people who value the same things that I value along what I've described. The idea of that the mission is important, being here tomorrow is important, so becoming a viable business is important. I think if we can agree on those values and maybe some of those beliefs, we can create a plan of attack on how to actually get to that place. But if you can't acknowledge the problem, and if you're not committed to the idea of the viability is the way to go initially, that's very, very hard to work with. Um, I find on the business side, the folks are more open to this because this is naturally their world. It's actually, ironically, it's the technology side. It's a little harder. Um, having, and I've grown up in this nearly 2 decades of low interest rates and capital being very, very cheap. There is a little bit of an engineering culture of we can kind of do anything at any cost. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to focus on the technology. Um, I, I find that can be a challenge at times on the engineering leadership side. That I think you have a generation of engineering leaders who have never gone through a belt tightening like we are currently seeing. So this is a foreign concept to them. And while I appreciate that, um, this is also a learning opportunity. So that's what I look for as well, is the people on that side of the leadership house as well, is saying, we get it, we know this has to be done. Um, and not being too precious about the technology. I say boring technology is generally cheap technology, and boring technology is generally reliable technology. You
Mhm.
can go very far with a very sophisticated monolith on a handful of web servers. You can go very far with a very nicely tuned database. Um, and the cost structure of that is at one level. You don't need like hundreds of auto scaling servers inside the cloud. I think the marketing departments of a lot of cloud vendors have been very, very good at their job to convince an awful lot of people they need a lot more than they do. But you can go very, very far, as I said, with a handful of web servers. So that's the other side as well. I think it, it's funny. I don't want to be like accusatory, but I sometimes see that people earlier in their career, they associate their value with how technical they are and how, say, sophisticated their solutions are and how much tech that they're playing with. And something I've learned as my career has gone on is actually, because I'm running a business, I don't want a lot of complexity. I want this to be very boring. I want this to be very reliable and very straightforward. So I see the value in that now in the future. So that's what I try to get to on that side of the house, is just get the folks to see that, and a lot do. Don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing stones here, but it's the folks who don't, or who struggle with the ideas. If they see their work in a different way, that can be a challenge. So I try to see if that's in the culture.
That makes a ton of sense. I think there is a whole school of thought where over engineering is almost a sense of pride.
Mm,
And, there comes a deep excitement and enjoyment for making it as sophisticated as possible, even if that's not actually what's needed. And so I'm glad that you're fighting the good fight to discourage that. Um, I'm curious now if obviously you can't help every company turn around, but let's say if we were going to scale you in a way that you could kind of cascade some of your knowledge for, let's say, young Clive, Lil Clive years ago. Let's say he's a founding engineer at a company, has not been in a CTO seat before, but he is kind of the lead dev. And I think there's lots of startups in this situation where they had a lead dev. Maybe they're
I agree.
starting to get out a little past their skis and they're like,
Yes.
what do I do? And so, are there any like kind of quick things that you could share that maybe like you would have loved to know early in your career that you could pass on to someone that maybe is in that position? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, actually, early in my career, I was very fortunate to work in a couple of businesses where the the actual business model was exposed to me. So literally, this is how we make money. We need these things to be true at all times for this to work out. And here's the costs that are involved. If I was advising young engineers now, I would say go find a counterpart on the business side who can teach you that kind of stuff. And I don't mean teach you as in school, but like expose you to it. Well, our marketing costs are this, or our customer acquisition costs are that. Um, our profit margin is this, so we need a customer to make n number of purchases before we're profitable of them. Projected lifetime value of customers is this. While these numbers may not directly affect your decisions that you make every day in engineering, you will find they eventually seep in. You'll start making business related questions, or at least you might go back to those individuals for input. So um, I would say go and find that counterpart and learn their language. Because the one thing I have learned in my career is the trust I have gotten from that side of the house has been when I learned their world, learned what they valued, learned their language, used it with them, and the trust was this guy gets it.
Mm,
It can be great then for when you do want to make a technological move in the future that can impact the business in a positive way, but maybe the technological solution requires a little bit more trust than normal. Yeah, you can build credibility with people. And I think leadership is a lot of communication, trust, and credibility. And you can get that by showing an interest in their world, understanding their values, understanding their language, understanding what they're trying to do.
love that. Great advice. If you're listening to this, I hope you're taking notes. That's awesome. Uh, Great stuff, Clive. What obviously again you can't help everybody, so I'd love to know like what is your availability look like? Like, are you helping other turnaround situations right now? Do people need to get in line? What should someone do if they want to bring you in and get help on a turnaround situation?
Yeah, sure. I'd say the best way to get in touch with me is to find me on LinkedIn. Put in Clive Foley. There's not too many Clive Foleys on LinkedIn. You'll find me. I am currently in the middle of a turnaround at the moment. I work on one turnaround at a time. I find that it requires an awful lot of attention, and I can't really do two of them at a time justice. Turnarounds for me tend to last between 6 and 10 months, depending on the complexity. I find at the end of those, you get to a tangible result where you can decide with a client whether or not there's another, say, twist around the flywheel to go. So yeah, I would say if you have an idea around a turnaround or you need some help with it, get in touch today. We're probably looking at early 25, to be honest with you, when we can do something. But we can be having conversations today. I can be learning about where your challenges are. I've been giving you pointers, tips, and tricks to get you set up. And then, yeah, for an engagement in 25, we could definitely have a conversation.
Awesome. That's a great offer to reach out and get some help from Clive, even if you have to wait for him to actually become available. You can get some pointers in the meantime. Excellent. Clive, thank you for the time today. Love hearing about what you're up to and excited for our next one to kind of hear more of how you've turned them around and maybe some other opportunities that you're starting to roll out in the market.
Super stuff. Todd, thanks for the invite. Always great to chat. And yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Talk soon.
See you soon. Bye.